I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal. Hey folks, welcome to So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick. Today on the show we have Paula Allen. She is the Senior Vice President of Research, Analytics, and Innovation at Morneau Shepell, and she's our second guest from Morneau Shepell this week. If you recall, on our Monday episode, we had Stephen Liptrap, the CEO of Morneau. I wanted to have both of these guests on because they each offer a bit of a unique perspective on mental health in the benefit space, in the kind of quasi-insurance helping people space in workplaces. Whereas in Steve's interview, we talked a lot about the EAP system, the Employee Assistance Program system, and how that works and some barriers around it. With Paula, I really enjoyed unpacking the personal side of it a bit more, right? And thinking more about the research and how it applies to workplaces and how workplaces have evolved over time. So, I've known of Paula for quite a long time in the workplace consulting space, but this is the first really in-depth conversation that we've had an opportunity to have. And I think we hit it off pretty well. So I'm grateful to Paula for coming in. Here's my conversation then with Paula Allen, the Senior Vice President of Research, Analytics, and Innovation at Morneau Shepell on So-Called Normal.
I'm Paula Allen. I'm with an organization called Morneau Shepell and have been with them for a number of years, 21 years now. And in my career, I started out actually working with kids. So working with kids who had a number of different issues, multiple disabilities, mental health issues. And I did neuropsychological testing and strategies to help them function the best way that they possibly could.
Right.
And then I took a career shift and started to work with employees on disability and was horrified.
How so?
I was horrified. Because when you're working with children, I mean, you're working to make sure that they're fully integrated, making sure that they're fully supported. The whole idea, which is what I faced when I started to work with adults on disability, was when somebody had a compromise and they had a mental health issue in particular, they were isolated. They were, the encouragement was to go home and to, recover by yourself and be by yourself.
And that wasn't your experience working with kids, though, when everybody wanted to help them, right?
Well, more than that, that would have been child abuse. You isolate a child who's having difficulties. Right. You isolate a child who's having mental health struggles. Even saying that, it sounds ridiculous. But that was the case with adults back then.
Yeah.
So I do remember my then fiance just telling him that this is like the worst job in the world. But subsequent to that, obviously, there's a number of us in the organization that I started with and still am with had a different view. And since that time, we know better and we are doing better.
Right.
But that initial experience of kind of seeing the end of the parade and the worst of the end of the parade has really kind of inspired me throughout my career in terms of looking at all the things that are done or not done that could have made the situation better.
Right.
Because even if that didn't happen, if that wasn't the norm back then, you see, and when you talk to individuals, you see things like, they're having difficulty, but they delay getting help because of stigma, because of fear of others, fear of even family members and what they would think, fear of losing their jobs. You see people talk about what happened in the workplace, how others responded to them. You hear about what happened even when they actually started on disability and how actually the process itself, again, back then, might have actually made things worse.
Right.
So it was a very informative early career about all the opportunity there was to do different. And a lot of my career has been spent with a number of wonderful people trying to change that.
So in those early days, and maybe it's the same now, I don't know, what kinds of struggles were people dealing with that you were encountering?
Well, if you take the clinical struggles aside, because those don't change. Those are just part of who we are as human beings.
And specifically mental health type clinical struggles, depression, anxiety.
Exactly. I mean, those have always been around. Those are part of who we are as human beings. There will always be, the struggles that some of us, experience at one point in life or another. But I think the main issue is the connection, the loss of connection with the workplace and the loss of identity.
Right.
So
How much of that is, and I know you're not a psychologist, are you?
I'm a psychometrist.
Psychometrist,
yeah,
okay.
We don't have a TV show, but we will shoot. We will soon.
Someday.
Yeah. Someday there will be one.
But you know, in terms of the struggles that people are dealing with going in, were they self-isolating as a symptom of the, depression, for example? Self-isolation can be a symptom of that. Or was it because of those around them who were isolating them? I guess I'm wondering which direction you think it was going in.
Well, it's both for sure.
Right.
But the ones that I'm most concerned about is not the ones that are symptoms of any kind of struggle or disorder. The ones that I was most concerned about are the ones where society actually made things worse.
Right.
And
how would you tell the difference in terms of how would you know if they were self-isolating, if it was, as many managers say, it's their problem, it's all in their head, versus no, it's actually your problem, or partially so?
Well, let me give you a couple of examples. Please. In workplaces, very often we think of managers who actually are harmful to people's mental health as bad managers, bad people. That's kind of the assumption. But I've seen very often it's really just uninformed. Mary is having some difficulty. Mary, lost her partner, is having a lot of trouble getting through the grief. Mary's having a little bit of difficulty dealing with stress. We feel that Mary is. So let's just make sure that Mary doesn't have any additional stress from work. So we won't give her the kind of projects that we used to give her. If we're having a hard meeting, we'll just make sure that Mary's not invited to that meeting. Mary might be hesitant to come with us to go out to lunch, but rather than encouraging her the way that we normally would, we just leave her alone, So those kind of quote unquote kind behaviors, just to kind of, protect people, are really, inadvertently isolating them. And they're actually making, think about yourself in Mary's position. All of a sudden, the people that you've worked with so many years are treating you differently.
Right. And they either think they're helping or they just are nervous and they don't know how to react or respond.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that treating differently is a big deal, right? You're already feeling different. And if it's exacerbated by the way other people are treating you, you're already tending to isolate. If that is kind of enforced or, people aren't encouraging, you're not really, you're losing your connections as opposed to getting stronger connections, that makes things worse.
Right.
So those are the things that I think are really something that I think we as a society need to pay attention to. And in that exact example, it was a manager. And in that exact example, I really think that manager just didn't have information. So one of the good news, because like I said, a lot of what I'm referring to right now definitely happens. I'm sure that it's happening right now, even as we speak. Sure. But there is a greater enlightenment amongst workplaces, and there is improvement in terms of those things that were actually making things harmful for individuals. And
Morneau Shepell has recently done some research on this, I understand.
Oh yeah. We do it.
We've done actually quite a lot of research on this over a long period of time. But can you tell me more about what you've been finding?
A few things. So we actually just did. We over the past 5 years, we've been doing a national survey, and in that survey, what we wanted to do is to really get to the heart of the experience of people in the workplace with respect to mental health. So it's a little bit of a different take. So, we have expertise, there's research from, in terms of what does and what doesn't work from a clinical and a programmatic point of view. But we just wanted to understand what was in people's heads and minds and hearts. So part of that, we've been looking at stigma. So a lot of what we're talking about in terms of mental health has to do with stigma, not getting access to care, et cetera. Yeah.
And what would be your operational definition of stigma? What do you call stigma?
Well, we had 3.
Okay.
So we had 3 aspects of stigma. If someone were to know that I had a mental health issue, or if I were to have a mental health issue, I would be treated differently and more negatively in the workplace. It would compromise my career. Okay, that was one. So the workplace stigma. The other was with respect to colleagues, like my friends, my family, and that's what we defined as social stigma. People would treat me differently and more negatively. And the third was self-stigma. I would feel more badly about myself.
Right. And I'm good at that one. That's sort of a specialty of mine.
Well, that we have found that's the hardest one to change. Actually, it's really very intractable. But having said that, in all three areas over the past 5 years, with the workplace population that we were interviewed with, that we surveyed, there's been improvement. So there's been improvement. So people are talking more about mental health issues. People are not feeling that they're so unique if they have struggles, because so many people have come out, and there've been many surveys, including ours, that show that it's pretty wide prevalence. So all of that's good. So the trend is good. The not so good is still where it is. So in terms of the self-stigma and the social stigma, those have gone down, but there's still about 50% of people are saying that they experience or they believe that they would be treated more negatively, and they would feel badly about themselves.
Are you able to, this is more difficult to do, but to drill down into actually, if it's actually happening? So yes, people are afraid that they might be treated differently. Are they actually being treated differently?
That's an interesting, that particular survey didn't do that, but I'm going to speak to something that'll get at that in a second. The workplace stigma was the highest. So back 5 years ago, it was about 77%. It's always been the highest. So that's been the most concerning for us, and it has dropped, but only at about 67% now. So it's like, if you look at the different areas of one life, so self-stigma, social stigma, and workplace stigma, without question, feeling that sense of stigma in the workplace is still the biggest challenge.
Were you able to nail down, although a modest and still very high, what has contributed to that? Has it been a global awareness, or has it been managers are getting better at reducing stigma and talking about mental health in their workplace? What's accounting for that decline, do you think?
I think there's two things that have been happening in the workplaces. Number one, workplaces are really sort of addressing the issue of mental health straight on. I've worked with organizations where a senior leader, CEO level, has used one of their communication vehicles, like Ask Me Anything or blogs or whatever, and actually started to speak about mental health. And just giving some very clear human messages. So we know that employees who come to work every day are struggling with different levels of stress, and some are struggling with really quite significant mental health issues. And, we're happy that you're here. We're happy that you're coming in. Right. But we want to do better. We want to make it easier for you to get access to the supports that we have and fill in any gaps in supports that we should have but we don't have. We want to make sure that you do understand that there is no tolerance for stigma in our workplace, and we know that we have a ways to go, but we will work to get there. And just starting that conversation, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to show that intentionality. And even just opening up the language of mental health, it wraps around the world twice in terms of the impact on employees. So again, I've seen that happen. And the other thing that employers are doing is really communicating more strongly around, mental health, anti-stigma campaigns. Some have had employees, like actual employees in the workplace, speak about their own journey.
Sure, champions.
Exactly. But what's really very powerful about that is when you, as an employee, you see your coworker talk about their struggle, how they managed. They are in a position that's similar to yours. They are at the workplace, thriving, even though they had this difficulty. It helps people relate. It helps people have hope.
You realize, they're not that axe murderer that I saw on Law and Order, that they're just a normal, so-called normal person.
So-called normal. That's a great name for a podcast, yeah.
So what do, or does
Can I just stop you for
please,
one thing? Because I one of the things that's really quite critical in this, and going back to my example about Mary, is manager training. Right? So, I'll give you another story. When we first started this manager training in the earnest, because there's always been training around mental health in workplaces. EAPs offer that training, and typically it has been voluntary. So people self-identify and they go, and there's good attendance, but it doesn't hit the entire population.
And the people who should be going probably aren't the ones.
Bang on, that's
going.
it. Yeah. So one of the first organizations that we worked with who made that training mandatory for managers, that was a very big deal.
Right.
So the messages from that are, number one, mental health is important to us. The mental health of our population, the culture that we have is important to us. Number two, the message is, as a people leader, you have influence, and we want you to have positive influence on the mental health of your team. Right? We want to give you those skills because we know that you're dealing with situations every single day, and we want to make sure that you're equipped. You are a manager of your entire team, not just the people who are in optimal mental health. Sure. That's a very powerful message. Yeah. So they were still, even though they had all those right intentions and messages, still nervous. They say, oh my God, like our managers are going to be cynical. They're going to be not paying attention. What an opposite reaction.
Really?
Yeah. So I had the opportunity of actually looking at some of the feedback, the written feedback. Thank you for this. It helped me understand and put into some perspective the issues that I've been dealing with. That was one type of response. Thank you for offering this training. It's the best thing that this organization has ever done. I am more proud of my organization than I ever have been for taking on this issue and making sure that all managers are equipped. I deal with things every day, and I've always been worried that I'm dealing with them badly. Now I know how. Now I have skills. The overwhelming response from managers was positive and not even lukewarm positive, like over the top positive.
Have you been noticing, I've read a bit of not very well publicized research that courses like public education courses like mental health first aid, for example, are very effective, but they're not necessarily effective at what they thought it was effective at doing. That courses like that, and not to single that one out, but I'm a fan of that one actually, that they're designed to teach you how to help other people. What they end up doing is teaching you how to help yourself, right? Is this the case with manager training as well, do you think?
We took a very conscious approach to it, and actually, not even, thinking that we are the experts and know all. We actually partnered with Queen's University as well. We wanted to make sure that this was truly workplace skills training, because remember what I said. I mean, this is the managers are the representatives of the workplace. Sure. We believe that infusing culture and policy and practice into a workplace is really part of good business, and we also think it's important for a manager's role. So the conscious intent was to make sure that training was to help equip managers with respect to their role. Right. Role playing around how they would manage situations, setting boundaries so they're not going into the role of therapists. They are taking appropriate action. They are supporting the continuum of health, mental well-being, to somebody who is struggling at work, to somebody who is in absolute crisis, to somebody who's returning to work from a disability leave, that full continuum. Now, that is the intention. That is the structure. One can't be a part of that without actually gaining some benefit for yourself. Sure. But that's not the way it's structured. That is one of the secondary consequences.
Do you think that is either necessary or at least helpful for managers to have this kind of self-knowledge, but also to be potentially vulnerable, to open up about, we talked about having workplace champions and people opening up about their own struggles. How useful is it to have people leaders and even up to the CEO sharing stories of their own personal challenges in this respect?
What our role is to make people feel comfortable doing that. What our role is to make sure that there's an environment where if somebody chooses, then they can go ahead. What our role is to make sure that people have knowledge that if they're having struggles, probably the person left and right of them has had that at some point in time, maybe shown itself differently. So our role is just to make sure that context is there. And then when people actually make that choice, that tends to actually be very powerful for them, very positive for them. And because we've taken care to make that context also very well received. Yeah.
Now, do you find these types of changes, raising mental health awareness and behavioral changes in workplaces, is it a top-down approach that's coming from management, from policy changes, or is it a bottom-up thing where the employees are demanding this kind of change?
In different workplaces, I've seen different things, but interestingly enough, more top down.
Really?
Yeah.
And is it trickle down awareness? Are people actually believing it, or is there? Because I've seen this before sometimes too, sort of whatever the workplace equivalent of a cognitive dissonance would be, where there's a belief at the top, or even words at the top, but either people at the bottom yet don't believe it, or aren't seeing actions in accord with the belief, or there's a disparity there.
If that happens, then something didn't happen properly.
Okay.
If you have an intention to do better, then you have to actually do something. It can't just be. It can't just
talk about it.
It can't just be your intention.
Right.
So even in the situation where I'm talking about what the CEO would, in those organizations had brought forward, that is an action that is setting the stage.
Yeah.
But very often that's only the first step.
Right.
The manager training, the anti-stigma campaigns, making sure that you have good services, making sure that people know how to access those services. Typically what happens when you actually do all of those things, you do the manager training, the communications, the CEO awareness, the use of services skyrocket.
Sure.
Like we've seen,
I wanted to ask you about this.
Yeah.
And this used to be a thing for years where even private practice psychologists, for example, and nonprofit mental health services, they'd be hesitant to advertise their services because they already had waiting lists, right? And it would increase people. So people see this all the time. EAP access goes up.
Yeah.
Help-seeking behaviors go up.
Yeah.
And then I think they get afraid that suddenly, I don't know, maybe they think they're making people sicker or they're making people realize, but this isn't a bad thing, is it?
Of course, it's the exact opposite.
Right.
Like we know only a fraction of people seek help. If we would be wonderful if if everyone who had a need sought help and also sought help early.
Right.
Why would you wait till a crisis situation to seek help when it's available in a proactive way?
Well, in a business sense, it's much more expensive to intervene later when the problem is more intractable.
Exactly. And the loss is not it's the financial loss, it's loss of potential, it's loss of the individual's confidence, it's all of that. So we've seen from a financial point of view, even just a modest increase of just 10% more on your EAP, that correlates with higher return on investment. That was actually even validated in a paper that just came out this week. It was published by Deloitte, the ROI on mental health. It's a blueprint for employers.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very good paper that actually gave some examples. And one of the examples that they gave was Bell Canada, who did everything that I said.
Sure.
And they had a 190% increase in their EAP.
Wow.
So more people accessing and people accessing earlier.
Right.
And they saw a 50% reduction in relapse and recurrence in terms of mental health disability claims. They saw 20% reduction in overall in STD. So if you move things up front, if you put them where they really should be, which is helping people at the earliest possible moment, then it's not only good for them, and better for them. You've changed the course of their life, but you've also made a very wise business investment.
Tell me more about EAP for those. I suspect a lot of listeners are familiar with employee assistance programs and family and employee assistance programs.
I wouldn't assume so,
Really?
I thought that everybody knew, but let me talk about it.
Because tell me about Morneau Shepell, about EAPs and EFAPs, and what all this stuff actually is.
Okay. So employee assistance program is EAP, and it's the same program is sometimes called Employee and Family Assistance Program, EFAP. And again, it's really the same thing because virtually all EAPs, except from, there might be 0.0001%, don't also allow for family members. So it's full service in that respect. And basically what it is it's a service that allows employees 24/7, 365 days a year to reach out for help. And the help is broad and it's varied. So every single day, one of our business lines is employee and family assistance. Every single day that we have multiple calls for people who are in a suicide, a crisis state. So suicidal ideation.
So what do you do when somebody calls their EAP when they're suicidal?
We have counselors. We have trained counselors available on the phone. It's not just people who are triaging.
So they're doing the intervention right there on the phone.
They're doing the intervention. intervention. And we'll make sure that that person is safe. We always make sure that people understand the boundaries of our confidentiality as well. So in majority of cases, we are able to kind of stabilize that person, make sure that they get to longer-term assistance immediately, see one of our face-to-face counselors and go from there. We also make it clear to people when they've reached out for help, our intention is to help them. So in an absolute critical situation, we may also bring in 911 just to make sure that they are safe. But this is something that we deal with every single day.
Right.
So that's one end of the spectrum. We also deal with people who are struggling because they have, stress. They're having palpitations because of, work strain, helping people go through divorce and separation. And we coach individuals because, they say that they're having difficulty communicating with their child. And how do they actually support that communication better? So whether or not we could actually, work with the child as well, but we also work with the individual. We support managers. So if, somebody could go through the training, or if they haven't gone through the training, or they're in a unique situation, or they've forgotten that part, they can call us for manager consultation. So, they see an employee who's behaving differently than they did before. What do they do?
And I think that piece is such a valuable service because managers don't realize that. They think that it's only for themselves. They don't realize they can call somebody and ask them for help.
Exactly. So, I literally could spend years about all the different situations that employee and family assistance deals with. And that's even just from a clinical side. The other side is that we also help people with practical challenges. There's legal services, there's financial services, finding childcare, there's finding elder care, because those are very real issues. Those cause stresses in individuals. And our intention is to help people, again, at the earliest possible point. You want to make sure that you're helping people with practical challenges before they become more, before they add to their strain, before they start distracting them. And then you get into the cycle that, I had a problem. I wasn't able to deal with that problem. I started to feel badly about myself. I started to not work as well. And then you kind of get into a spiraling. So basically, if you are having a struggle, call EAP and we will help you. Or if we cannot help you, we will help you find help. Someone who can. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the limits of confidentiality around, for example, someone who's suicidal. Now, that is standard practice for any healthcare provider, I think. But I think I'm not sure that everybody appreciates the other or the privacy constraints or the privacy around EAP usage. Now, how do you report back to your client, which is their boss, right? Their supervisor. What does that relationship look like?
Well, the short answer is we don't.
Right.
But it is a very, very important point. So, the whole premise of EAP is built on confidentiality. If there wasn't that confidentiality, if that wasn't the agreement that we have with the sponsoring organization, the industry would have collapsed as opposed to getting stronger over the past 50 years. So. Any health issue, any personal issue is confidential. So the fact that you call will never be shared. Period. The reporting that goes back to an organization is aggregate reporting. And if an organization is small and really doesn't, there's a risk of even reporting on an aggregate basis. It might even indirectly lead somebody to believe that they think they can figure out that it's between these two people. We don't report below a certain level.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that.
We don't report below. So the reason why we exist is to help people. The reason why we exist is to make their situation better. We know that helps the employer. So the employer agrees to these terms or we just don't contract with them.
Now, when people are going through this process, hopefully they're reaching out early for support when they recognize. But as you know, most people still don't reach out early for help. In fact, sometimes it's years into their struggle by the time they actually get help.
Yeah.
So sometimes the result of that is that they do need to take time off work, right? Or perhaps they've been through disciplinary processes that have really made the situation very difficult as well.
Right.
I've heard from, both coworkers and managers accusations that the other person is faking it or that why are they claiming mental illness now when they're about to be fired, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you encounter these kinds of issues all the time. So how do you, when you're brought in late to a situation like that, how do you disentangle all of these complications and try to resolve the situation?
Well, you have to deal with the ball where it lay. Like the person is experiencing something, so there's support that needs to happen in order to help that person and what their experience is. And another part of our business is actually absence and disability management and return to work support. And return to work support really isn't probably the best descriptor of it because it's also recovery support. It's removal of barriers to return to work as well as return to work planning. So there's that full circle.
Mental health problems are one of the primary drivers of short-term disability and long-term, I believe, aren't they?
Without question. So in terms of the primary diagnosis, about a third.
Right.
But interestingly, if you dig a little bit deeper, even amongst the physical disabilities, it's an exacerbating factor.
Right.
Because, there's some comorbidity. Like if you have a chronic pain situation, the likelihood that you have depressive symptoms are there.
Sure.
If you're in long term, even more so, because even just the fact of having a health issue and an impairment for a long period of time makes it more likely that you will also have a mental health issue as well.
And even if you're not the one with the chronic health issue, it's your mother, or it's your daughter, or it's somebody else in your immediate circle, that can impact you too.
Without question. So, I mean, when you look at disability, I think one of the core competencies for anybody who's dealing with somebody who it needs that recovery support and return to work support is understanding mental health. So we work with the individual. Do they have the right kind of care? What are their symptoms? Because everybody is different, even if you have a same diagnosis. And how is that impacting their ability to be their best, to function at work? So, we understand that as the core, but we also understand that their life is life, right? There's other things around it. So we look at all the different barriers. And the barriers could be the workplace experience before that person actually went off work. Barrier could be family, right? The barrier could be something like a non-medical personal issue that's going on. If somebody has financial struggles, it could be, going through a divorce. It could be a whole bunch of things. So we set in place a plan, and as a support plan to help deal with all of those issues, and educating the managers. Making sure that the workplace environment is welcoming, coaching the workplace on that is an important part of it.
So, can I ask you just on that point, if one of your counselors or professionals or whatever part of your business they're involved with, they detect that the person is probably going back into a psychologically unsafe workplace for whatever, at least according to their account. Perhaps they are, and often people don't realize that they're being harassed or bullied, or that it is a psychologically unsafe workplace. What role then do you have to go to the counselor to help them to have that conversation with their manager who might be making inappropriate comments, for example, or whatever the situation might be? How do you interface with the workplace, or is it exclusively focused on that person who is having the challenge, whatever it is?
Yeah, well, we have an advantage, and the reason why we have that advantage is because we've created it, because we see those things happen all the time. We have more than one role.
Right.
So the counselor themselves is dealing with the individual. We also have case managers who are disability focused.
Okay.
And they're the ones who can manage return to work negotiations or bring in even third parties to help with those negotiations. They're the ones who deal with a wide range of barriers. So even as we're helping the individual, regardless of whether it's a positive or negative workplace, people, in my experience, benefit from being coached when they're returning to work. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety because you've been out of the workplace. You weren't at your best when you left. Are you going to do well? How are you going to deal with people when they're talking? So it's important to prepare the individual. The other part is to prepare the workplace. So what can the person do? What can't they do? What kind of environment is appropriate for somebody returning to work? Now, what's important is that we can't reveal to the workplace the diagnosis or the nature of it. Like we can't say, Jim is coming back again, and he just is, coming back from a major depression, and these are the things that you have to do because of a major depression.
And does the workplace even need the diagnostic information?
No, they don't need it, and they can't have it.
Right.
It's off the table.
Right, exactly. So if a manager manager asks an employee, I think in most jurisdictions, what their diagnosis is, or to prove their diagnosis, do they need to provide that diagnosis?
The employee?
Right.
No. But it's a very uncomfortable situation when your manager asks you something and you tell them no. So this brings me back down to the workplace environment and the manager training, and why you can't really disentangle any of these components if you really want a system that works well, because it is a system. So one of the things that's really important for managers to know is that when anybody goes off work, returning is hard. It doesn't matter whether you've had a heart attack or you're off because of depression. It's more difficult because society has made things more difficult for people who have mental health issues. But also remember what I just told you, that there's a good portion of physical health disabilities that have mental health underlying components as well. Sure.
Even just coming back to work from a long vacation, change is hard, right? Getting back on that schedule again is hard.
Yeah, and understanding that. Like if your employee is coming back and they seem more fatigued, that's okay. Like that's normal, right? It doesn't mean that your return to work plan is failing. That's an important coaching point for the managers to understand. Welcoming that person back is so critical. Like you think, there was a wonderful speaker who mentioned something about kids. And he was, renowned in many, educated in many ways and expertise in many ways. But the only thing I really remember from him is saying, one of the best things that you can do for your children is to light up when they enter the room. Right?
I love that.
It's just such a simple thing, but the message of being happy to see someone really is so empowering to that individual. And I'm happy that I actually started my career working with kids, because working with children, every skill applies to adults.
Oh, it turns out workplaces are just grown-up schoolyards.
It's without question.
It's not different.
Without question, yeah. So think about it. If somebody is returning to work from a disability leave, and unfortunately, sometimes what people do is they try to ignore the person. Like it's pretend that they haven't even laughed. But ignoring, that leaves a lot of white space for negative interpretation.
Sure. Especially if one of the person's symptoms is rumination of, well, what are all these people thinking about me? Right?
Exactly. Yeah. But the skill that we kind of try to bring forward is just treat people returning like new employees. Right. You welcome new employees. You take them out to lunch. You make sure that they know everything, because again, this is a very fast changing workplace environment. Just generally speaking, if you were off in January and you returned in June. Things have changed in your workplace, right? You have also been not connected. You've forgotten a few things, so just help people transition back in as if they were new employees. And everybody knows how to deal with a new employee. Everybody treats new employees very well. Apply those same skills to someone who's returning. And that new employee mindset is really important for managers as well, because it is important for them to understand that you might have had some difficulty with this person before they left. You know why? You know what you have to think about? They had to even leave work. They were ill and needed to leave work. They probably were struggling before they had to take that time off work. So please wipe the slate clean. Give them that new employee chance. So we don't want to complicate things for managers. We just want to tell them very simply frameworks and have them draw on skills that they already have.
Should an employee disclose that they were off because of a mental health problem, or that they're currently struggling and still at work and have a diagnosis of a mental health problem? I
would not use the word should. I think in my feeling, and I feel fairly strongly about this, anything about you that's your information, your personal information, your waist size, how many kids you have, whether you have a heart murmur, whether you have suffered from double depression. That's your business. It's your choice as to whether you share it or not. I think it's lovely if we have an environment where people feel open that they can share. But even if we have the best of environments, it is still your choice. So I would never say should. I would say, what do you feel comfortable with? And then if you share that, that's great. If you feel comfortable not sharing anything about yourself, then that's your choice. I just think that we as a society have to be more responsible for environments that force people into feeling that they can't.
Right. Yeah. Through an intersection, I think, of those layers of stigma that you discussed earlier. The self-stigma, they're all going to think I'm crazy and treat me differently. And they might actually treat you differently in measurable ways. And that workplace stigma as well. Yeah.
Well, the one thing, though, that I want to kind of raise is I do feel that people need to have that control, because I don't want anybody to feel pressured into, again, revealing your pant size or whatever it is. That's your
I have
choice.
very few things that people don't know about me. Any regular listens to the show know this.
That is cool.
I'm very unusual.
But it is important for people to have connections. It's, in your life. We're very social beings, right? So having a connection, sharing even with one individual is important. Feeling that you can't share, feeling that you don't have a connection anywhere, really kind of puts you into a place where you're not really leveraging one of the things that helps us deal with challenges better than anything else, which is social support, right? So whether it's you share on Facebook or you share with one person is actually much more powerful. It's much deeper. And one of the things that we have found in our survey as well that I'll just sort of bring forward is that even as stigma has gone down, people's sense of isolation has gone up.
Interesting. What's going on there?
It's not just, we asked about isolation at work, and we also asked about isolation just in one's personal life, and both have gone up about equally.
Right.
And isolation, just generally speaking, is something that has been increasing in society for a while.
Sure. There's no more bowling teams.
There's no more bowling teams. We're able to do so much more by ourselves that we are doing so much more by ourselves. We don't have, the traditional faith-based structures that we have. We have very, very busy lives. There's all sorts of societal reasons. And it is quite the river. Like we're just seeing this. You might know or may not know that, and a few years ago, UK actually created a position with Minister of Loneliness.
Right.
The CDC and others are really kind of making very powerful statements, saying isolation is really the health impact, not just mental health but physical health, cardiovascular and immune system. That it's as powerful as smoking in terms of damaging your health. So, and we are seeing increases, in younger cohorts.
And there have been several studies to suggest, too, that you make most of your friends when you're younger, and that millennials and older don't know how to make new friends. We don't know as adults how to make friends. So how do we address those kinds of issues in workplaces?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. You don't do anything unless you know that it is an issue, right? So I think there's two things. One is that people should know that isolation is damaging, right? So you need to know that on an individual basis, and employers and anybody who has influence over groups needs to know that as well. The other thing is that you are more likely at risk now than you were before because there is a societal tide.
Right.
And the analogy that I like to use is even around the health risk of exercise and activity. So there was once a time where, we didn't have cars, we worked in fields or whatever, and getting enough exercise in the day wasn't an issue. Nobody had to have a gym membership because you walked places, that was just the way life was. And then very slowly and almost imperceptibly, things started to change, and we are where we are right now, where people have to count steps and they have to be very intentional around getting what their body needs. The same thing is with isolation. There was a point in our society where you could not survive without other people. Like literally you would die if you did not have connections with other people. And, slowly over time that became less and less true.
Right.
We had more distractions that took us away. We had fewer role modeling opportunities for connections. Our social structures change. It's imperceptible. It moves in that direction. So we need to have that same kind of intentionality around connecting with other people, because it's not going to happen as naturally as it did.
Technology is intentionally designed to put you in an echo chamber, to surround you with opinions and people who you're most likely to click on something that is like what you already believe, and reject things that you don't.
Right.
So it seems like we're in many ways driving our own disconnection from others. So then where does that put us in terms of the trend from when you first started out working with kids to all of the mental health work we've been doing? We've raised a lot of awareness. Celebrities are talking. We're doing podcasts about mental health. We're doing all kinds of stuff about mental health. But Dr. Heather Stewart, among many others, talks about the sometimes chasm that exists between awareness or attitudes and behaviors.
Yes.
So people think and say a lot of things. Is it actually changing measurably workplaces and behaviors in workplaces?
The answer is yes, but not for as many as it should.
Right.
So we're still, I think, we're a little bit past maybe just the early adopter leader, the kind of the bulkhead stage. There have been employers who have really taken on the charge quite well. They are doing everything that they can to improve the workplace culture. They're making services available to people. They've attended to those on disability. They're training their managers. They're optimizing and investing more in EAP. They've gone further even. And you mentioned technology. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. If you allow technology just to kind of control you, then you can go down a negative path. Sure. But you can use technology as well to kind of get over some of the challenges. I'll give you a couple of examples. You can go into Facebook and you could actually have a fake life, or look at other people's fake lives, or you could have 1,000 friends, none of which you actually know. Right. You could spend you could respond to stress by going onto that or any other social media and spending 3 hours and not having any connection and not getting any kind of resolution to your issue. That's not good.
Right. Being present-y in your own life.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Or you could use that same vehicle and you could connect with others. You could use groups to find out, where there's events going on and be with people who have like interest and meet them. I've been able to connect with people who I never would have been likely connect with, who I went to high school with, and we're able to form relationships. So it's, a lot of it has to do with the intentionality of your use. If you just let it control you, you'll probably not be in a bad place. Right. If it's structured, or if you are intentional about how you use it, it could be great. Yeah. From a workplace point of view, a lot of people don't even work with other people face-to-face anymore. You're working from home. You're working from people who are in Spain or UK or whatever. And you could do that, and you could communicate to each other by email or not even at all, or you could use the technology and have video conferencing, so you're at least able to have that kind of visual connection, which is quite powerful in terms of forming relationships. You could use your time in that telephone or video call and actually get to know people, or you could be task focused. So there are skills that people can build, and there is a culture that an employer can build that can help stem this tide. It's
been fascinating to me to observe the near visceral reaction to the trend in open offices. That people, I actually really quite like open office environments. I'm an introvert, and I find that it actually helps to draw me out, and I like that. But nobody else likes open offices, it seems. I think I'm the only one. But I think you're right. It is in how you use it, and creating these spaces, physically designing spaces that bring people together and that provide areas for people of different needs to work differently. I think that's an interesting emerging trend in workplace design as well. So tell me then, speaking of trends and staying on the trend train here, so that's where we've come. Where are we going? What's next? What's innovative and interesting, or are we sticking with the raise mental health awareness track?
Oh, we're definitely going into some pretty good places. So a couple that I'll speak to. I do see mental health and mental well-being as being more on the CEO agenda than it's ever been.
Sure.
Absolutely. We did a study with U.S. CEOs, and the well-being of their population was one of the top 3 things that they're concerned about. Mm-hmm. They want people to be at their best. They know that there are challenges. We even talk to them about their own issues and how that impacts their leadership style, and they're aware that that you can't manage a group of people. You can't manage a business, particularly in the environments that we have right now, which are very fast-paced, if you are not supporting their well-being, with the mental well-being being the core.
Right. So, and do you think that will end up being the competitive advantage, taking care of the mental health of your employees, that actually weeds out the people who don't, that they're not going to be as successful?
You are right where I am. Yeah. You are right, absolutely. Because, if the Deloitte study actually shows this as well, that the organizations that have that enlightenment and actually act on it, not just talk about it, they perform better on the S&P 500 than their peers.
Oh, wow.
So, and think about where workplaces are right now. If you look at the definition of today's workplace, there's constant organizational change. Mm-hmm. You're needing people to be smarter than ever because you're needing to be disruptive or pay attention to other disruptors. It's a pretty demanding environment for very good reasons. I mean, that's just the way industry and society is. So if you don't help your people, be their best in that situation, and again, it's total well-being, but it's mental well-being at its core, how can you possibly expect to do well? The other thing that's happening is that we're moving upstream. So again, when I started, really the only people who got any kind of meaningful support, even though at that point, in my view, it was still inadequate, was people who were on disability leave, right? And even EAPs really were more crisis-based. Back then, we used to even have situations where you had to be referred to get the EAP, which is unheard of now. So we've slowly moved up the chain, so you don't have to be on long-term or short-term disability. If somebody is struggling at work, there's a way that we can intervene early with all the tools of support and helping people stay at work. We're using EAP more than ever before and more proactively, but we're also helping people's overall well-being. So that total well-being approach is more powerful than it's ever been, because mental health is impacted by so many different things. Like your financial well-being impacts your mental health. Sure. Your physical well-being impacts your mental health. We spoke about relationships impacting your mental health. So we know all of this. So it doesn't make sense to not deal with all of this with some intention. So the way the whole mental health support is going is not only, building it into like a business agenda, but making sure that people's overall well-being gets taken care of. And ironically, using digital tools to help give them information and awareness and access. Because if people are all over the place, you're working from home or you're working here or there, and some of your employees are all over the place, you need some central way to make it easy for them to understand what support's available and to start that support in a very meaningful way using digital tools. So again, technology can be one direction or another, and we're seeing the use of technology more and more.
Yeah. So what would you suggest for somebody who's listening to this? I mean, we publish these episodes generally first thing in the morning. So maybe they're listening on their way into work right now, and maybe they're struggling. Maybe they're not happy at work for whatever reason. Not to say your job needs to make you happy all the time, but what would you tell somebody who's struggling at work and hasn't even started this either the road to recovery yet, or they don't know what their workplace offers? What would you suggest to somebody who's just having a hard time going into work this morning?
Very, 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 very simple first step is to call your EAP. Like, I am very serious. Like, if it's crossed your mind that things are not the way they should be, that's a great first step. because that'll help you plan what your next step needs to be. Because both of us might be struggling, but me for very different reasons. I'm in a different place than you, but that's what EAPs are meant to help you sort out. So if you're feeling overwhelmed with work, you're not able to make your deadline, that's a place you can go. If you are worried because you're going down a path and you don't really know whether you're going to be able to get up next day, it can help. The whole industry was made and designed so the person, the user, doesn't have to filter whether they should or shouldn't call. So whether you feel that your issue is very minor or quite significant, it's designed to be your first step.
Yeah. And workplaces, if you have any, and most workplaces, it seems now, do have EAP programs. So if you have them workplaces, advertise them, promote them, because I've seen so many who don't. They have these numbers and their employees don't actually know that this is a resource that they have. And it's one piece in the puzzle, of course, but it's important to actually know that you have access to that piece.
Yeah, and that's where technology is helping too. Like even we've put our EAP access on an app along with a lot of other well-being tools. And with all of those tools, you can be getting information, you can be reading articles, you can be participating in challenges. But because it's an app, it's always there with you. So when you need the EAP number or you want to text a counselor, even you don't necessarily even want to talk, it's right there. The other thing is, if your company doesn't have an EAP or you're, self-employed or whatever, maybe your partner's does. So, because remember, it's family. Right. So the majority of Canadians are covered, even if not directly, indirectly.
That's great. Paula Allen, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today. It's been fun. It's been educational. And I'm so glad that we were able to share this information with the audience.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing this podcast. I really admire what you've been doing and glad to be a part of it.
Thanks, Paula. That's it. That's my conversation with Paula Allen. Paula is the Senior Vice President of Research, Analytics, and Innovation at Morneau Shepell. Our second guest this week from Morneau Shepell when we had their CEO, Stephen Liptrap, on earlier in the week. So I'm so grateful to Paula and Stephen both for coming on the show to chat more about employee assistance programs or employee and family assistance programs and the diverse perspectives that each of them provide on those systems. I think that not a lot of people realize, I mentioned this in Stephen's interview as well, not a lot of people realize the types of resources that they have available to them when they're struggling, when they're feeling vulnerable, that they don't have to go through this alone, that it doesn't have to be so hard all the time if they reach out for help and if they take more control over their well-being. And that they can really put some supports in place. So I'm grateful to Paula and Stephen for providing some of those supports through workplaces, through a lot of workplaces in Canada, and I hope that more people access them. If you enjoyed that interview, head on over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the show. Scroll down to the bottom, leave us a star rating, leave us some comments, let us know what you think. Or if you don't have Apple Podcasts, go over to any of the other many platforms that So-Called Normal is available on. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube. I put them up on my website, markhennick.com. Head over to any of them and check out our many, many past episodes. Let me know what you think on social as well and share these episodes. I'm at Mark Hennick, at MarkHennick, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, everywhere else. I'm not hard to find. So let me know what you thought and share any parts of the conversation that you found insightful. I'd like to thank the team that makes these episodes possible and these conversations possible. Here at E1, we have Adrian and Kimberly and their team, and Dave, my editor who assembles these episodes. I couldn't do these without them. So thank you all so much as well. The listener, of course. I can't forget the listener for bearing with my long-winded outro. That's all right. Thank you all so much for listening to So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick.